Newly divorced, she moved into a luxury home and fell in love with her millionaire neighbor until she discovered he was her new best friend's ex-husband. The deafening sound of the gavel echoed through the courtroom. "Divorce granted," declared the judge in a monotone voice. For Olivia Hartley, those words marked the end of one era and the beginning of another. At 35, she suddenly found herself free of a marriage that had long since lost its luster. As she walked out of the courtroom, Olivia felt a mixture of relief and apprehension. The sound of her heels against the marble floor seemed to set the pace for her new life. Her lawyer, a middle-aged woman with a reassuring smile, put her hand on her shoulder. "Congratulations, Olivia. I know it's not easy, but you've made the right decision. Now it's time to start again." Olivia nodded, trying to hold back the tears that threatened to fall. They weren't tears of sadness, but of an emotion she couldn't name. Fear of the unknown, perhaps, or anticipation of what was to come. 2 months later, Olivia was unpacking the last boxes in her new home in Westport, Connecticut. The property was much bigger than she needed, but the divorce settlement had been generous, and she decided to indulge herself. After all, it wasn't every day that someone had the chance to start again from scratch. The house was a dream, 3 floors of modern architecture, with large windows that let in the sunlight and offered a breathtaking view of the Long Island Sound. The neighborhood was exclusive, full of stately mansions and meticulously tended gardens. While organizing her belongings in the spacious gourmet kitchen, Olivia heard the doorbell ring. Frowning, she wondered who it could be. She still didn't know anyone in the neighborhood. When she opened the door, she was confronted by a smiling woman, appearing to be just over 40, holding a welcome basket. "Hi, I'm Madeline Russo, your neighbor from next door. I've come to welcome you to the neighborhood." Olivia smiled, genuinely touched by the gesture. "How kind of you. I'm Olivia Hartley. Please come in." The 2 women soon discovered that they had a lot in common. Madeline was also newly divorced and had only moved to Westport 6 months ago. As they chatted in the living room, sipping glasses of white wine, Olivia felt like she had found a friend. "So, Olivia, what brings you to Westport?" Madeline asked, her blue eyes sparkling with curiosity. Olivia hesitated for a moment before answering. "Well, to be honest, I'm starting over. My divorce was finalized 2 months ago and I needed a change of scenery." Madeline nodded sympathetically. "I understand perfectly. I went through something similar, but believe me, this place has a way of healing broken hearts." As they talked, Olivia couldn't help but notice how comfortable she felt with Madeline. It was as if they had been friends for years, not just a few hours. As the afternoon progressed, Madeline decided it was time to leave. "Oh, before I forget," she said, turning in the doorway. "There's a party at the yacht club next Saturday. Why don't you come along? It'll be a great opportunity to meet more people." Olivia hesitated. Parties weren't exactly her thing, especially now that she was single, but Madeline's encouraging smile convinced her. "Sure, why not? It sounds like fun." Over the next few days, Olivia busied herself with tidying up the house and exploring the neighborhood. Westport was a charming town, with its perfect blend of seaside charm and suburban sophistication. She found herself imagining what her life would be like there, far from the painful memories of her failed marriage. On the night of the party, Olivia looked at herself in the mirror, nervously adjusting her navy blue dress. It had been so long since she had been to a social event without her ex-husband that she had almost forgotten what it was like to dress to impress. Madeline picked her up promptly at 8. The yacht club was stunning, with its classic architecture and panoramic sea views. Olivia felt a chill in her stomach when she saw the number of elegantly dressed people circulating in the hall. "Relax," Madeline whispered, noticing her nervousness. "You look beautiful. Come on, I want to introduce you to some people." As the evening progressed, Olivia was surprised by how comfortable she felt. People were friendly and welcoming, and she found herself engaged in interesting conversations about art, literature, and travel. It was then that she saw him. He was standing near the bar, a glass of whiskey in his hand, chatting animatedly with a group of men. Tall, with gray hair at his temples and a smile that lit up his whole face, He was the embodiment of mature charm. As if he sensed her gaze, he turned and their eyes met. For a moment, Olivia felt as if the world had stopped. He smiled at her, a warm smile that made her heart race. "Who's that?" Olivia asked Madeline, trying to sound casual. Madeline followed her gaze and smiled. "Oh, that's Alexander Blackwell. He's—" But before Madeline could finish, Alexander was walking towards them. "Good evening, ladies," he said, his voice deep and melodious. "Madeline, what a pleasure to see you again. And who is your charming friend?" Olivia felt her cheeks flush as Madeline made the introductions. There was something about the way Alexander looked at her that made her feel special, wanted. "It's nice to meet you, Olivia," Alexander said, taking her hand and placing a soft kiss on her fingers. "I hope you're enjoying Westport." "I'm loving it," she replied, surprised by the firmness of her own voice. "It's a lovely place." "That's good to hear. Maybe I can show you some of my favorite places in town sometime." Olivia felt her heart leap. Was that an invitation? She was about to reply when Madeline intervened. "Alexander is a real connoisseur of Westport," she said, her tone slightly tense. "He's lived here for years." The rest of the evening passed in a blur for Olivia. She found herself searching for Alexander with her eyes several times, and whenever their gazes met, she felt a shiver run down her spine. When she got home, long after midnight, Olivia threw herself on the bed, exhausted but happy. For the first time in a long time, she felt alive, thrilled with the possibilities her new life offered. Little did she know that that night would mark the beginning of a journey that would test not only her newly healed heart, but also the limits of her new friendship with Madeleine. The days following the party at the yacht club passed like a whirlwind for Olivia. She found herself constantly reminiscing about that night, especially the moments with Alexander Blackwell. His charming smile and intense gaze had left a lasting impression. One sunny Saturday morning, Olivia decided to explore the charming center of Westport. As she walked along Main Street, admiring the elegant boutiques and cozy cafes, she heard a familiar voice. "Olivia? What a pleasant surprise." She turned around and there was Alexander, with a warm smile that made her heart race. He was wearing jeans and a blue polo shirt that highlighted his eyes, looking even more attractive in the daylight. "Alexander, hi," she replied, trying to contain the enthusiasm in her voice. "I was just exploring the city a bit." "Well, you couldn't have picked a better day," he said, looking up at the cloudless sky. "Have you had breakfast yet? I know a great place nearby." Before she could think twice, Olivia found herself agreeing. They walked side by side to a small cafe on the corner, chatting as if they were old friends. The cafe was cozy, with rustic wooden tables and the scent of fresh bread in the air. As they savored croissants and coffee, Alexander and Olivia plunged into animated conversation. "So, what brought you to Westport?" Alexander asked, his eyes fixed on her. Olivia hesitated for a moment. "Well, to be honest, I'm starting over. I went through a divorce recently and I needed a change." Alexander's face softened with understanding. "I understand perfectly. I went through something similar a few years ago. It's not easy, but Westport has a way of healing wounded hearts." The sincerity in his voice touched Olivia deeply. She felt comfortable enough to share more about her life, her work as an interior designer, and her dreams for the future. The hours flew by as they talked. Alexander was an attentive listener and had a sense of humor that made her laugh like she hadn't laughed in years. When they finally looked at the clock, it was already past noon. "Wow, time has flown," Olivia exclaimed in surprise. Alexander smiled. "You know, I'd love to show you more of the city. How about a stroll along the harbor this afternoon?" The invitation was tempting, but Olivia remembered that she had arranged to have lunch with Madeleine. "Oh, I'd love to, but I already have plans for today. Maybe another day?" "Of course," Alexander replied, a slight disappointment in his eyes. "Next time." They said goodbye, and Olivia walked home with a smile on her face and a lightness in her heart that she hadn't felt for a long time. Later, over lunch with Madeleine in a seaside restaurant, Olivia couldn't stop thinking about Alexander. She found herself staring at the horizon several times, lost in thought. "Earth to Olivia," Madeline joked, snapping her fingers in front of her friend's face. "Where are you?" Olivia blushed, taken aback. "I'm sorry, Mad. I was just thinking." Madeline looked at her curiously. I know that look. Is it to do with a certain gray-haired gentleman we met at the party?" Olivia hesitated for a moment, but decided to be honest. After all, Madeleine was her friend. "Actually, yes. I bumped into Alexander this morning on Main Street. We had coffee together." Madeleine's smile faltered for a moment, so quickly that Olivia almost didn't notice. "Oh, that's nice. And how was it?" "It was great," Olivia replied, her enthusiasm evident. "He's so easy to talk to, so interesting. He even invited me for a stroll along the harbor, but I told him I already had plans with you." Madeleine nodded slowly, stirring her salad without actually eating it. "Olivia, darling, I think I need to tell you something about Alexander." Madeleine's serious tone made Olivia sit up straighter, a twinge of concern rising in her chest. "What is it?" Madeleine sighed deeply before speaking. "Alexander and we were married. He's my ex-husband." The words hit Olivia like a punch in the gut. She stared at Madeleine, dumbfounded, unable to process the information. "Your ex-husband? But why didn't you tell me before?" "I was going to tell you that night at the party," Madeleine explained, her voice shaking. "But then I saw the way you two looked at each other and, I don't know, I guess I panicked. I didn't want to complicate things." Olivia felt a wave of conflicting emotions: shock, confusion, even a little anger. She thought of all the times she had mentioned Alexander to Madeleine over the last few days, without knowing the truth. I don't know what to say," Olivia finally managed to speak. "That changes everything." Madeleine reached across the table, taking Olivia's hand. "Look, I know it's a lot to process, but I want you to know that our friendship is important to me. If you want to move on with Alexander, I'll understand." Olivia looked at her friend, seeing the sincerity in her eyes, but she couldn't ignore the complexity of the situation. Her heart, which hours before had been light and hopeful, now seemed heavy with doubt and uncertainty. "I need some time to think," Olivia finally said, getting up from the table. "I'm sorry, Ahmad, but I think I need to be alone right now." As she walked back home, Olivia felt as if the ground had been lifted from her feet. She had come to Westport in search of a fresh start, but now she found herself in the middle of a complicated emotional triangle. As the sun set over Long Island Sound, Olivia wondered how something that had seemed so promising in the morning could have become so complicated in a matter of hours. She knew she would have to make a decision between a potential romance with Alexander and her friendship with Madeleine. And, for the first time since arriving in Westport, Olivia felt truly alone. The days following Madeleine's revelation were a whirlwind of emotions for Olivia. She isolated herself in her new home, ignoring messages and calls from both Madeleine and Alexander. She needed time to process everything and decide what to do. One particularly melancholy afternoon, Olivia decided she needed to go out. The fresh air and change of scenery might help her clear her head. Without much thought, she grabbed her car keys and drove to Campo Beach. The beach was almost deserted, with only a few couples walking along the shore and children playing in the sand. Olivia took off her shoes and let the cool ocean water touch her feet, feeling a momentary calm. "Olivia?" The familiar voice made her freeze. She turned slowly to see Alexander standing a few meters away, a worried expression on his face. "Alexander." "Hi," she replied, trying to keep her composure. He took a step towards her, hesitantly. "I tried to call you, but—" "I know," Olivia interrupted him. "I'm sorry, I just needed some time." Alexander nodded, understanding. "Madeleine told you, didn't she?" Olivia felt a lump form in her throat. "Yes, she did." For a moment, they were both silent, only the sound of the waves filling the air between them. Finally, Alexander spoke. "Olivia, I'm sorry. I should have told you about Madeleine from the start. I didn't mean to complicate things. She looked him in the eye, searching for sincerity. Why didn't you tell me? Alexander sighed deeply. Honestly, because when I met you, for the first time in a long time, I felt alive. I didn't want the past to interfere with that. His words touched Olivia more deeply than she would have liked to admit. She too had felt that connection, that spark of something special. But Madeleine is my friend, Olivia said softly. My only friend here in Westport. I know, Alexander replied. And believe me, the last thing I want is to cause problems between you two. Madeleine and I. We've had our moments, but now we're just good friends. Olivia raised an eyebrow, skeptical. Good friends? After a divorce? Alexander gave a small smile. Believe it or not, yes. Our marriage ended amicably. We realized that we were better as friends than as a couple. As they talked, they began to walk slowly along the beach. Olivia felt her resistance diminishing as Alexander explained more about his past with Madeleine and how things had ended between them. Look, Olivia, Alexander said, stopping and turning to face her. I understand if this is too much for you. If you want me to walk away, I'll respect your decision. Olivia looked at him, feeling her heart racing. Part of her wanted to say yes, to ask him to step aside and simplify her life. But another part, a growing part, didn't want to let him go. I don't know what I want, Alexander, she admitted. It's all so complicated. He nodded, understanding. I know, and I'm not asking you to make a decision now. I just want you to know that if you decide to give this, he gestured between them, I'll be here. At that moment, a cold wind blew in from the ocean, making Olivia shiver. Without hesitation, Alexander took off his coat and draped it over her shoulders. The gesture, so simple and gentle, made her feel a wave of warmth run through her body. Thank you, she murmured, pulling the coat tighter around her. They continued walking in silence for a few minutes, each lost in their own thoughts. When they arrived back at the place where they had met, Olivia knew she needed to make a decision, at least for now. Alexander, she began, her voice trembling slightly. I need more time. To think, to talk to Madeleine. You understand, don't you? He smiled, a gentle, understanding smile that made her heart melt a little. Of course I understand, Olivia. Take all the time you need. I'll be here when you're ready. They said goodbye with a quick hug, and Olivia felt as if an electric current ran through her body in the brief moment they were in contact. As she drove home, Olivia knew she had a difficult conversation ahead of her. She needed to talk to Madeleine, clarify things, and, most importantly, understand her own feelings. Arriving home, Olivia picked up her phone and, after a moment's hesitation, typed a message to Madeleine. Can we talk? Tomorrow at the cafe on Main Street at 10 a.m.? The reply came almost immediately. Sure, I'll be there. That night, lying in bed, Olivia reflected on the events of the last few weeks. She had come to Westport in search of a new start, but never imagined that she would find herself in the middle of such a complicated situation. As the sound of the waves echoed in the distance, Olivia closed her eyes, trying to find peace amidst the whirlwind of emotions. Tomorrow would be a new day, a new chance to understand her heart, and perhaps find a way through the emotional maze she found herself in. What she didn't know was that the conversation with Madeleine would bring revelations that would change everything once again. The morning arrived with a soft mist hanging over Westport, as if nature itself was trying to smooth the edges of the conversation to come. Olivia woke up early, her stomach in knots as she prepared to meet Madeleine. Arriving at the Main Street Cafe a few minutes before 10 a.m., Olivia chose a table at the back, away from prying ears. Her hands trembled slightly as she stirred her cup of coffee, anxiously awaiting Madeleine's arrival. At 10 a.m., the cafe door opened and Madeleine entered. Her eyes scanned the room until she found Olivia. With a hesitant smile, she approached the table. Hi, Liv, Madeleine said softly, taking a seat. Thanks for meeting me. Olivia nodded, trying to keep her composure. Thanks for coming, Mad. I think we have a lot to talk about. For a moment, an uncomfortable silence hung between them. Finally, Madeleine spoke. Olivia, I'm sorry. I should have told you about Alexander from the start. I just didn't know how. Olivia took a deep breath, gathering her courage for the questions she needed to ask. Why didn't you tell me, Mad? You knew I was interested in him. You saw the way we looked at each other at the party. Madeleine lowered her eyes, guilt evident on her face. I know. At first, I thought it was just a passing attraction. But then I saw how the two of you connected and I panicked. Panicked? Why? Madeleine hesitated, seeming to struggle with her words. Because I still have feelings for Alexander. The revelation hit Olivia like a punch in the gut. She leaned back in her chair, trying to process the information. But you told me that the divorce was amicable, that you were better as friends. We are, Madeleine exclaimed, her eyes pleading. At least, that's what I'm trying to convince myself. The truth is that our marriage ended because Alexander wanted something different out of life. He wanted to travel, explore the world. I wanted stability, a family. Olivia listened attentively, feeling a mixture of compassion and confusion. And now? Madeleine sighed deeply. Now, I don't know. Seeing Alexander with you, so lively and full of life, made me realize that maybe I made a mistake letting him go. Silence fell over them again, heavy with the gravity of Madeleine's confession. Olivia felt her heart breaking, not only for herself, but also for her friend. Mad, Olivia began, choosing her words carefully. I didn't know. If I'd known, I never would have. No, Liv, Madeleine interrupted her, reaching out to take Olivia's hand. You didn't do anything wrong. It was me who complicated everything by not being honest from the start. Olivia felt tears forming in her eyes. What do we do now? You're my friend, Mad. I don't want to lose that. Madeleine squeezed Olivia's hand gently. Neither do I. Your friendship means a lot to me, Liv. That's why I need to be completely honest now. Olivia looked at her expectantly. I saw you and Alexander on the beach yesterday, Madeleine confessed. It wasn't intentional, I swear. I was taking my usual walk and, well, I saw you talking. Olivia's heart raced. Oh, Mad, No, please, let me finish, Madeleine said, her voice trembling slightly. Seeing the two of you together, the way he looked at you, how he put his coat around your shoulders, I realized something important. What? Olivia asked, barely able to breathe. I realized that Alexander has never looked at me like that, Madeleine said, a sad smile on her lips. Not even in the best moments of our marriage. And that's when I realized that my feelings for him are more about the fear of being alone than about true love. Olivia felt a wave of relief and gratitude for her friend. Mad, I don't know what to say. You don't have to say anything, Madeleine replied, wiping away a tear. I just want you to know that if you want to give Alexander a chance, you have my blessing. More than that, you have my support. The two women stood up simultaneously, wrapping each other in a tight embrace. Tears flowed freely now, a mixture of sadness, relief, and, above all, friendship. When they finally separated, Olivia looked into Madeleine's eyes. Are you sure about this, Mad? Your friendship is too important to me. Madeleine smiled, a genuine smile this time. I'm sure, Liv, you deserve to be happy. And if Alexander can do that for you, who am I to stand in the way? As they left the cafe together, Olivia felt as if a huge weight had been lifted from her shoulders. The morning mist had cleared, revealing a clear, sunny sky, a perfect reflection of how she felt inside. However, as they walked down Main Street, Olivia couldn't help but feel a twinge of apprehension. She now had Madeleine's blessing. But was she really ready to open herself up to a new relationship? And more importantly, was Alexander still waiting for her? With a heart full of hope and a touch of trepidation, Olivia knew she had an important decision to make. The next step in her Westport journey was about to begin, and she couldn't wait to see where it would take her. Fall had arrived in Westport, painting the trees in shades of red and gold. For Olivia, it seemed that the change of season perfectly reflected the transformation in her own life. In the weeks following her conversation with Madeline, Olivia plunged headlong into her work as an interior designer. She had landed a few local clients and was busy renovating summer houses for next year. The work was a welcome distraction, giving her time to process everything that had happened. One particularly hectic afternoon, Olivia was in the middle of a meeting with a client when her phone vibrated. It was a message from Alexander. "Hey, stranger. I miss you. How about a coffee?" Olivia felt her heart racing. Despite Madeline's blessing, she was still hesitant to take the next step. But something in that simple message made her smile. After finishing her meeting, she replied, "I'd love to. How about tomorrow afternoon at the Little Port?" The reply came almost instantly. "Perfect. I can't wait." The next day, Olivia arrived at Pequeno Porto, a charming seaside cafe, a few minutes early. She chose a table on the balcony, overlooking the ocean. The cold autumn wind ruffled her hair, but she hardly noticed, too nervous about the imminent meeting. Waiting for someone. The familiar voice made Olivia turn around. Alexander was standing there, smiling, with 2 travel cups of coffee in his hands. "Actually, yes," she replied, returning the smile. "A really nice guy who makes the best coffee in town." Alexander laughed, taking a seat next to her. "Well, I hope he doesn't mind that I got ahead of him," he said, offering Olivia one of the cups. She accepted the coffee, her fingers brushing against his for a brief moment. "Thanks. So, how long have you been coming here?" "Oh, forever," Alexander replied, looking out at the ocean. "This place has the best views in Westport, perfect for contemplating life." Olivia nodded, understanding what he meant. For a few minutes, they sat in silence, just enjoying the view and each other's company. Finally, Alexander spoke. "Olivia, I'm sorry for how complicated things have become. I never wanted to cause problems between you and Madeline." Olivia turned to face him, seeing the sincerity in his eyes. "I know, Alexander, and everything's fine now. Madeline and I talked. We've cleared everything up." Alexander looked surprised. "Really? And how was it?" Olivia hesitated for a moment before answering. "It was, enlightening. Madeline was very honest about her feelings, and about yours." Alexander raised an eyebrow. "Mine?" "Yes," Olivia continued, feeling her cheeks heat up. "She told me that she saw us on the beach that day. She said that she'd never seen you look at her the way you looked at me." Alexander's face softened, a gentle smile forming on his lips. "Well, she's not wrong. Olivia, from the moment I met you, I felt something. Different. Special." Olivia's heart was pounding in her chest. "I felt it too, Alexander, but I was afraid. I still am, to be honest." Alexander reached out, covering her hand with his. "What are you afraid of, Olivia?" She took a deep breath, gathering the courage to be completely honest. "I'm afraid of getting hurt again, of trusting and being disappointed, of losing not only a potential relationship, but also a precious friendship." Alexander squeezed her hand gently. "I understand. Believe me, I have my fears too. But you know what? I think it's worth the risk." Olivia looked into his eyes, seeing in them a mixture of vulnerability and determination that touched her deeply. "What do you say, Olivia?" Alexander continued. "How about we give it a chance? No rush, no pressure, just let's see where it can take us." At that moment, with the sound of the waves in the background and the autumn wind blowing gently, Olivia felt something inside her loosen. A knot she hadn't even known she'd been carrying since her divorce began to unravel. With a smile, she entwined her fingers with Alexander's. "You know what? I think you're right. It's worth the risk." Alexander's smile lit up his whole face. Without saying a word, he leaned in and kissed Olivia softly. It was a brief kiss, almost chaste, but full of promise. When they parted, Olivia felt dizzy, but in a good way, as if she were at the top of a roller coaster, about to start a thrilling descent. "So," Alexander said, still smiling, "what do we do now?" Olivia laughed, feeling lighter than she had in years. "How about we start with a walk along the beach? I hear the sunsets from here are incredible." Alexander stood up, holding out his hand to her. "Sounds perfect." Hand in hand, they left the cafe and walked towards the beach. The sun was beginning to set over the horizon, painting the sky in shades of pink and orange. As they walked along the sand, chatting and laughing, Olivia felt a sense of peace she hadn't experienced for a long time. She didn't know exactly where this new chapter in her life would take her. But for the first time in a long time, she was eager to find out. What Olivia didn't know was that, while she was taking the first steps in this new relationship, unexpected events were about to test not only her connection with Alexander, but also her newly strengthened friendship with Madeline. The weeks that followed were like a dream for Olivia. Her relationship with Alexander blossomed, filling her days with laughter, deep conversations, and tender moments she hadn't experienced for a long time. Westport, which had previously seemed only a temporary refuge, was beginning to feel like a real home. One sunny Saturday afternoon, Olivia and Alexander decided to have a picnic at Earth Place, a nature sanctuary on the outskirts of Westport. As they walked along the wooded paths, hand in hand, Olivia couldn't help but smile as she thought about how her life had changed. "What are you thinking about?" Alexander asked, noticing her smile. "How funny fate is," she replied. "A few months ago, I was so lost. And now, well, now I feel at home." Alexander stopped, pulling her close. "I'm glad to hear that," he said softly, before kissing her. The moment was interrupted by the sound of Olivia's cell phone. She picked it up, frowning as she saw the name on the screen. "It's Madeline," she said, a touch of concern in her voice. Despite her friend's blessing for her relationship with Alexander, things were still a little tense between them. "Hi, Mad," Olivia answered. "What's up?" Madeline's voice on the other end of the line sounded agitated. "Liv, I'm sorry to interrupt your weekend, but I need your help. It's an emergency." Olivia exchanged a worried glance with Alexander. "Of course, Mad. What happened?" "It's my mother," Madeline explained, her voice shaking. "She's had a stroke. I'm in hospital now. I don't know what to do." Olivia's heart squeezed. She knew how close Madeline was to her mother. "Oh, Mad, I'm on my way. Which hospital?" After getting the details, Olivia hung up and turned to Alexander. "I'm sorry, but I have to go. Madeline's mother is in hospital." Alexander nodded, understanding. "Of course, let's go. I'll drive you." The drive to the hospital was tense and silent. Olivia couldn't help noticing how uncomfortable Alexander looked. She knew that he and Madeline's mother had been close during their marriage. When they arrived at the hospital, they found Madeline in the waiting room, looking pale and exhausted. Seeing Olivia and Alexander together, her eyes widened for a moment before filling with tears. "Oh, Liv," she sobbed, falling into Olivia's arms. "I'm so scared." Olivia hugged her tightly, casting a grateful glance at Alexander over Madeline's shoulder. He nodded in understanding and went to get coffee for everyone. The next few hours were a blur of conversations with doctors, forms to fill in and moments of tense silence in the waiting room. Olivia stayed by Madeline's side the whole time, offering silent support. It was late at night when the doctor finally showed up with news. "Mrs. Russo," he called out, and Madeline stood up, trembling. "Your mother is stable now. The stroke was mild and we were able to intervene in time. She'll need therapy, but the outlook is good." The relief on Madeline's face was palpable. She turned to Olivia, hugging her again. "Thank you for being here," she whispered. It was then that Olivia noticed Alexander standing a little way away, looking out of place. She reached out to him, pulling him into her embrace. For a moment, the three of them stood there, united by relief and gratitude. Later, when Madeline went to see her mother, Olivia and Alexander were alone in the waiting room. "You were amazing today," Olivia said, squeezing his hand. Alexander smiled, but there was a shadow in his eyes. "Thank you. I just wanted to help." Olivia sensed that there was something more. Is something bothering you? He hesitated before answering. It's just that being here, seeing Madeline like this, reminded me of when we were married, of how I wasn't always there for her in difficult times. Olivia felt a knot forming in her stomach. What do you mean? Alexander sighed deeply. When we were married, I was always traveling for work. I missed a lot of important moments. Even when Madeline's father died, the silence that followed was heavy. Olivia didn't know what to say. Part of her wanted to comfort Alexander, but another part felt strangely threatened by this revelation about his past with Madeline. Before they could continue the conversation, Madeline returned. She's awake, she announced, a tired smile on her face. Her eyes landed on Alexander. She asked for you, Alex. I think she'd like to see you. Alexander looked surprised, but nodded. Casting one last glance at Olivia, he followed Madeline into her mother's room. Alone in the waiting room, Olivia found herself fighting a wave of conflicting emotions. She was happy that Madeline's mother was recovering, grateful that she could be there for her friend, but also unsure about what the day had revealed about Alexander and Madeline's past. As she watched Alexander and Madeline walk down the hospital corridor together, Olivia couldn't help but wonder if their past really was behind them. And, more importantly, whether she was really ready to deal with all the complications that came with this new chapter in her life. What Olivia didn't know was that the events of that day would be just the beginning of a series of challenges that would test not only her relationship with Alexander, but also her friendship with Madeline, and, most crucially, her own inner strength. The days following the incident at the hospital were a whirlwind of emotions for Olivia. She found herself torn between the desire to support Madeline during her mother's recovery and the need to process her own insecurities about her relationship with Alexander. One particularly chilly fall morning, Olivia decided to take a walk along Campo Beach to clear her mind. The biting wind off the sea and the cold sand beneath her feet seemed to perfectly reflect the turmoil inside her. Her phone vibrated in her pocket. It was a message from Alexander. "Good morning, beautiful. I missed you yesterday. Can we talk?" Olivia hesitated before replying. Since the day at the hospital, she had distanced herself a little, using work as an excuse. But she knew she couldn't put this conversation off forever. "Of course. I'm at the beach now. Would you like to join me?" The answer came quickly. "I'll be there in 15 minutes." As she waited, Olivia reflected on the last few weeks. The image of Alexander and Madeline together in hospital, sharing a history and memories that she wasn't part of, continued to haunt her. "Hey, you." Alexander's voice brought her out of her thoughts. He approached, offering a hesitant smile. "Hi," she replied, trying to smile back. They began to walk side by side, the silence between them heavy with unspoken words. Finally, Alexander spoke. "Olivia, I feel like something has changed since that day in the hospital. Do you want to tell me what's going on?" Olivia took a deep breath, gathering her courage. "Alexander, I don't know how to say this without sounding insecure or jealous." He stopped, turning to face her. "Just say it, Liv. Whatever it is, we can deal with it together." "Okay," she began, her voice trembling slightly. "Seeing you and Madeline together in the hospital, the way you understood each other without words, how you knew all her family, it made me realize how much history you share. History that I'm not a part of." Alexander nodded slowly, understanding. "I see, and that scares you." "Yes," Olivia admitted. "It makes me wonder if what we have can really compete with all this shared past." Alexander took her hands in his eyes fixed on hers. "Olivia, listen. Yes, Madeline and I have a history. I can't deny that. But what we have, you and I, is different. It's new, it's exciting, it's real." Olivia felt tears forming in her eyes. "But what if it's not enough? What if you realize that you prefer the comfort of the familiar?" "Oh, Liv," Alexander said softly, pulling her into a hug. Familiar isn't always better. Madeline and I divorced for a reason. What we have is a chance to build something new, something of our own. As she lay in Alexander's arms, Olivia felt some of her anxiety dissipate, but there was still one question she needed to ask. "Alexander," she said, pulling away a little to look into his eyes. "Do you still have feelings for Madeline?" The question hung in the air between them, the sound of the waves seeming deafening in the silence that followed. Alexander took a deep breath before answering. "Olivia, I'm going to be completely honest with you. Madeline will always have a special place in my heart. We've shared a lot together, but I'm not in love with her. What I feel for you is different. It's stronger, deeper." Olivia nodded, absorbing his words. "Thank you for being honest," she said softly. "Always," Alexander replied, kissing her softly. As they walked back to the city hand in hand, Olivia felt lighter. The conversation hadn't solved all her fears, but it was a start. However, fate had other plans to test her newfound peace of mind. As they turned a corner, they bumped into Madeline coming out of a store. "Oh, hi," Madeline said, looking surprised to see them together. Her eyes rested on their entwined hands for a moment before returning to their faces. "Mad, hi," Olivia replied, feeling strangely guilty. "How's your mom?" "She's recovering well, thank you," Madeline said, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. "Actually, I was thinking of having a thank you dinner for everyone who supported us. Would you like to come?" Olivia and Alexander exchanged a quick glance before Alexander replied, "Sure, that would be great. When?" "How about Friday night? At my place," Madeline suggested. "We'll be there," Olivia agreed, trying to ignore the uneasy feeling in her stomach. After Madeline said goodbye and left, Olivia and Alexander stood on the sidewalk for a moment. "Well, this is going to be interesting," Alexander commented, trying to ease the tension. Olivia forced a smile. "Yeah, sure." As they walked back home, Olivia couldn't help thinking that, despite their enlightening conversation on the beach, the real test for their relationship was yet to come. Dinner at Madeline's house would be more than just a social gathering. It would be a direct confrontation with Alexander's past and a test for their future together. What Olivia didn't know was that the dinner would bring revelations that would change not only her relationship with Alexander, but also her friendship with Madeline and her own perception of herself. The stage was set for an evening that would change everything. Friday came quicker than Olivia would have liked. As she got ready for dinner at Madeline's house, she couldn't shake the feeling of apprehension that had accompanied her since their encounter in the street a few days ago. "Is everything all right?" Alexander asked, adjusting his tie in Olivia's bedroom mirror. She forced a smile. "Yeah, just a bit nervous." Alexander moved closer, putting his hands on her shoulders. "It'll be fine, Liv. We're all adults here." Olivia nodded, wishing she could share his optimism. The drive to Madeline's house was silent, everyone lost in their own thoughts. When they arrived, Olivia took a deep breath before ringing the doorbell. Madeline opened the door, a warm smile on her face. "Welcome. Come in, please." The house was beautifully decorated, with candles burning and the scent of delicious food in the air. Other guests were already present, including some mutual friends and Madeline's mother, who seemed to be recovering well. The evening got off to a pleasant start, with light conversation and laughter. Olivia began to feel more relaxed, thinking that perhaps her fears were unfounded. It was during dinner that things began to change. Madeline's mother, Mary with the wine, began to recall stories from the past. "Ah, Alexander," she said, laughing. "Remember that time you and Maddie tried to make a surprise dinner for me and almost set the kitchen on fire?" Alexander laughed, a nostalgic gleam in his eyes. "How could I forget? It was the last time I tried to cook anything more complicated than eggs." Olivia watched the interaction, feeling more and more like an intruder. She noticed Madeline's gaze, a mixture of longing and sadness that made her heart squeeze. After dinner, as the guests dispersed around the room, Olivia decided she needed some fresh air. She excused herself and went out into the back garden. The night was clear, with stars twinkling in the dark sky. Olivia took a deep breath, trying to calm her turbulent thoughts. "Is everything all right?" Madeline's voice surprised her. Olivia turned around, seeing her friend standing in the doorway. "Yes, I just needed a moment." Madeline approached, stopping next to her. For a moment, they stood in silence, looking up at the sky. "You know," Madeline began, her voice soft, "when you and Alexander started going out, I thought it would be harder for me." Olivia looked at her, surprised by her sudden honesty. Madeline continued, "But seeing you together tonight, I realized something." "What?" Olivia asked, her heart racing. "I realized that Alexander has never looked at me the way he looks at you," Madeline said, a sad smile on her lips. "Not even at the height of our marriage." Olivia felt tears forming in her eyes. "No, please let me finish," Madeline interrupted her gently. "What I'm trying to say is, you have something special, Liv, something that Alexander and I never had, and I'm happy for you. I really am." The two women hugged, silent tears falling. "Thank you, Mad," Olivia whispered. "Your friendship means the world to me." When they parted, Madeline wiped away her tears and smiled. "Now, let's get back to the party before Alexander thinks I've kidnapped you." They laughed, the air between them lighter than it had been in weeks. Back in the living room, Olivia found Alexander talking to some guests. When their eyes met, he smiled, a smile full of love and promise that made her heart leap. Later that evening, as they drove home, Olivia felt at peace. She looked at Alexander, who was driving in silence. "You know," she began, "I think I finally understood something tonight." "What?" he asked, curious. "I understood that the past is important, but it's the present that really matters, and the future we can build together." Alexander took her hand, kissing it softly. "I couldn't agree more, my love." When they arrived home, standing on the balcony under the starry sky, Alexander turned to Olivia. "Liv," he said, his voice full of emotion. "Tonight made me realize something too." "What?" she asked, her heart racing. Alexander knelt down, taking a small box out of his pocket. "I realized that I don't want to spend another day without you by my side. Olivia Hartley, would you do me the honor of marrying me?" Olivia gasped, tears of joy filling her eyes. "Yes," she whispered, 1,000 times yes. As Alexander slid the ring onto her finger and pulled her into a passionate kiss, Olivia knew she had finally found her place. Westport wasn't just a temporary stop on her journey. It was the beginning of a new life, full of love, friendship, and endless possibilities. And so, under the starry Westport sky, Olivia embraced her future, grateful for all the complications and challenges that had brought her there. Because in the end, it was through these trials that she found not only true love, but also herself.